before the world saw the viral moment of a veteran standing quietly in a dusty field waiting for a horse that once saved his life. There was a war. Brutal, unforgiving war in the mountains of a foreign land where survival depended not just on weapons and training but on trust. Captain Daniel Hayes was a soldier unlike most. He wasn't assigned to armored vehicles or helicopters. His mission required silence, stealth. He would talk to him about his family, about the little cabin he dreamed of building someday, about how he wanted to live a quiet life when the war was over. The quiet was deafening. Daniel didn't know where Vala had been taken. He drove for hours to the rescue farm, his mind flooded with memories. But when he arrived, standing in the middle of the open paddock was a horse that looked older, wearier, his once glossy coat now dulled by time. It was Vala. But something was different. His eyes didn't spark with recognition. He didn't move toward Daniel. He simply stood, head lowered, as if the years had erased the bond they once shared. And in that moment, Daniel felt his chest tighten. Had Vala forgotten him? Records were lost in bureaucracy, and every call he made to track him down hit a dead end. But he never stopped looking. He spent countless evenings on his porch, staring at the horizon, remembering the way Vala's mane caught the sun during those rare, peaceful moments in the mountains. He joined veteran groups online, hoping someone, somewhere, knew where the horse had gone. And then, one day, a fellow soldier sent him a message. A rescue organization for retired military animals had acquired several horses from an old government lot, and among them was a black stallion with a faint scar across his flank, the same scar Vala got during that mountain rescue. Nights were restless, filled with dreams of rocky trails and the sound of Vala's hooves pounding the earth. He tried to move on, got a small job in town, fixed up an old house, but there was a piece of him missing, a void he couldn't explain to anyone. Meanwhile, Vala was transferred to a government holding facility with dozens of other retired warriors. At first he paced endlessly, searching for the man who had been his only constant. Over time, without Daniel's familiar voice and touch, Vala became distant. He stopped responding to handlers, stopped eating as much, and stood silently in his pen for hours. Vala would flick his ears and nudge Daniel gently, as if he understood every word. They had each other's backs in a world where trust could mean life or death. By the time Daniel's deployment ended, he couldn't imagine leaving Vala behind. But military protocol didn't care about bonds. War horses were either reassigned, sold, or sent to government facilities when their service ended. The day Daniel was ordered to say goodbye was the hardest of his life. Vala snorted, pawing the ground restlessly, sensing something was wrong. Daniel pressed his forehead to Vala's and whispered, "You saved me more times than I can count. I'll come for you someday, I promise." But promises are fragile things in the military. Daniel was shipped home the next morning, and navigating terrain where machines couldn't go. He was part of a specialized cavalry unit trained for reconnaissance and supply runs through rugged mountain trails. And it was there, among the cliffs and valleys of a war-torn country, that Daniel first met a spirited jet-black warhorse named Vala. Vala wasn't like the other horses in the unit. He was faster, stronger, and far more temperamental. He had thrown off several handlers before, earning a reputation for being unmanageable. But when Daniel approached him for the first time, something changed. Instead of baring his teeth or stomping in defiance, Vala stood still, his piercing dark eyes meeting Daniel's with an almost human intensity. It was as if they silently recognized something in each other, two souls who didn't entirely belong to the world around them, but were willing to fight for it. From that moment, they became inseparable. Daniel spent hours gaining Vala's trust, feeding him, grooming him, speaking softly to him in the quiet moments before dawn. When the missions began, Vala proved his worth in ways no one expected. In narrow canyons where ambushes lurked, Vala sensed danger before the soldiers did, stopping abruptly and refusing to move until Daniel spotted the trap. In the chaos of surprise attacks, Vala would weave through gunfire with terrifying precision, carrying Daniel to safety more than once. There was one mission that defined them both. They were tasked with rescuing a stranded unit trapped beyond enemy lines. It was a brutal climb through jagged rocks and loose gravel, nearly impossible for any vehicle. But Vala carried Daniel and heavy medical supplies up the treacherous path, refusing to stop even when his legs bled from the sharp stones. When they reached the trapped soldiers, Vala didn't hesitate as gunfire erupted around them. He stood his ground, allowing Daniel to load the wounded and carry them out one by one. That day, Vala saved 6 lives. From then on, the soldiers whispered about the Black Warhorse with a heart as fearless as any man. In the rare moments of peace between missions, Daniel would sit beside Vala, leaning against his powerful frame as he wrote letters home. Back in the States, Daniel struggled. Years passed. Daniel's heart raced. Could it really be him after all these years? What happened next would shake everyone who witnessed it. The farm was quiet except for the faint rustle of leaves and the distant sound of other horses nickering in their paddocks. Daniel stood by the wooden fence, his hands trembling slightly, gripping the railing as he stared at the black stallion that once carried him through war. "Vala, it's me, buddy." The name hung in the air, fragile, almost hesitant. For a brief moment, the horse flicked his ear toward the sound but didn't move. His head stayed lowered, eyes dull and distant. Daniel's chest ached. He tried again, a little louder this time, and come galloping toward him like in the stories he'd read online. Instead, there was just silence, a chasm between them built from years of separation. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, how Vala would rush to him, how the bond they shared would bridge the years instantly. But reality was different. Time changes everyone, even the bravest souls. He took a deep breath and tried again. He stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. "It's me, Vala. It's Hayes. Yeah, that's it. Boy, it's me. I'm here now." He slowly extended his hand, palm open, the same gesture he'd used countless times to show Vala there was no danger, no threat. "Remember the mountains?" His ears perked slightly more. His body, once rigid and distant, seemed to relax a fraction. He stepped one pace closer. It wasn't a cinematic rush. It was slow, hesitant, but it was movement. He held his hand out, tears streaming down his face now. "That's it. Come on, boy. It's me. It's always been me. Remember the missions." He spoke softly, his voice breaking as the memories poured out. He lowered his head slightly, sniffing the air. His nostrils flared as he caught the faint, familiar scent of the man who once rode him through hell and back. His dark eyes locked on Daniel's, and for the first time there was a spark, small, faint, but undeniable. Daniel gasped. His knees nearly bucked. He placed his hands on either side of Vala's head, feeling the warmth of the horse's breath. "You remember, don't you? You remember me. You saved me more times than I can count." It echoed across the paddock, startling the other horses. He began pacing, agitated, circling the paddock with his head high, nostrils flaring like he was back in a combat zone. He stepped forward slowly, speaking in the calm, commanding tone he used during their missions. He turned to face Daniel again, and this time, there were tears in Daniel's eyes as he realized what he was seeing. Vala wasn't just recognizing him, he was remembering everything. It wasn't just a horse's cry. It was grief, recognition, a sound that came from the deepest part of his being. "Valar, stand down. It's okay. You're safe now." Daniel's heart pounded. "Vala, hey, easy, easy. Boy, you saved them all." The moment Daniel whispered goodbye before being forced to leave him. This time, he didn't just call the name. This was only the beginning of what would happen next. He buried his face into the thick mane and whispered, "I'm sorry I left you. I'm so sorry." Vala stood still now, his breathing heavy but calm, leaning into Daniel like he had finally found his lost rider. "What's wrong with him?" she whispered. He'd seen it before on missions. Right before danger struck, Vala was remembering something, but it wasn't good. Vala suddenly stepped back, his body tensing, ears flicking in different directions. He let out a sharp, loud snort, then stomped the ground twice. It wasn't fear, it was alertness, as if something had triggered an old memory, something from the war. Daniel froze. This wasn't the calm recognition he expected. This was Something else, Vala, do you remember me? The sound cut through the quiet like a blade. Vala froze his ears twitched. Slowly, his head turned toward Daniel, his gaze sharpening just slightly. Every step felt heavy, his boots sinking slightly into the soft dirt. He stopped a few feet away. Vala lifted his head slightly, his dark eyes glancing at him for the briefest moment. But then he turned away, walking toward the far end of the paddock. His eyes were still dull, but there was the faintest glimmer of confusion, like a fog lifting ever so slightly. Then he snorted, pawing the ground once. He stood still, torn between the past and the present. You have to give him time. These horses, they remember, but it doesn't always happen right away. He told him about the soldiers who asked about him, about how he'd been searching for years. He told him about the farm he'd bought back home, the open fields he imagined Vala running in, the quiet mornings they could share again. Just stay with him. Let him hear your voice. Vala was different now, older, heavier with time. His once glossy black coat was faded and streaked with hints of gray around the muzzle. His stance was no longer proud and alert, but weary, as if the years had pressed down on him like an invisible weight. Daniel's throat tightened as a flood of memories rushed through his mind. Vala charging through enemy fire without fear. Vala standing guard while he slept. Vala saving lives on those unforgiving mountain trails. It all felt like yesterday, but now, standing only a few feet away, it was as if a lifetime had passed. He called out softly the same way he used to in the war, but there was no spark of recognition. The rescue worker standing nearby, a kind woman named Marlena, stepped closer to Daniel and spoke gently. He's been through a lot. Some of these retired combat horses, they shut down after the service. They stopped trusting, stopped responding. It takes months for some of them to even let someone touch them again. Daniel nodded silently, but his heart was screaming. This was supposed to be their reunion. The moment Vala would recognize his voice, he climbed slowly into the paddock, careful not to startle him. Daniel felt a pang of defeat. It was a low, sharp whistle, the same one he used during missions when he needed Vala to come to him. There it was, a flicker of something. Daniel's heart raced. For a long, unbearable moment, Vala just stared at him. Daniel smiled through tears, but Vala didn't move closer. Marlena spoke softly from the fence. So Daniel stayed. For hours, he stood in that paddock, talking softly, telling Vala stories about the missions they'd been on, about the nights they spent huddled together in the freezing cold, about the lives they saved. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Vala began to change. Vala leaned in, pressing his nose gently into Daniel's chest, the way he used to in the war when he was checking if his rider was okay. But then, something strange happened. Before Daniel could react, Vala suddenly let out a loud, guttural neigh, a sound filled with raw emotion. But Vala wasn't just reacting to the present. He was reliving something buried deep in his memory, something spine-chilling. The handlers rushed over, unsure what to do, but Daniel didn't move. He knew this horse better than anyone. The gunfire, the mission where they lost half their squad, the explosion that nearly killed them both. And then, as if the weight of it all hit at once, Vala let out a low, mournful sound that made everyone watching freeze. The reunion wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, raw, and deeply human, even though one of them wasn't human at all. But neither of them knew. For a long time after that first reunion, Daniel stayed by Vala's side in the paddock, his hands gently resting on the horse's strong but trembling neck. The farm was silent except for the quiet snorts of the other horses in the distance and the soft murmurs of onlookers, who didn't dare interrupt what they were witnessing. The handlers watched from the fence, unsure if they were seeing a beautiful reunion or something far more complicated. Marlena spoke in a hushed tone to another volunteer. I've never seen a horse react like this. It's like he's remembering something. He sat at his kitchen table with an old notebook, flipping through the faded photographs and mission reports he'd kept from the war. At first, Vala was hesitant, his steps slow and unsure, but as they walked further, Daniel noticed a change in his posture. Vala's head lowered slightly, ears flicking, his movements cautious, like he was scanning for unseen danger. Then, as they passed a narrow path lined with trees, Vala stopped abruptly. He planted his hooves firmly and refused to move. They were supposed to deliver supplies to an allied outpost, but instead they walked straight into a trap. Daniel's knees weakened. His mind raced, pulling at the threads of memory he'd long ignored. And then it came, an image so clear it made him gasp. There had been an explosion. Daniel remembered Vala pushing him away from the blast, shielding him with his own body. But after that, it was all a blur. He remembered waking up hours later, Vala bleeding. Daniel had been too disoriented to process it back then, but now the memory resurfaced, sharp and painful. He saw the betrayal. He saw the reason the ambush had happened, but alive standing guard over him while the rest of the unit lay silent in the dust. He remembered the faint sound of enemy voices fading into the distance, but there was something else, something he had buried. Could it be true? He went through old mission reports, contacted surviving members of the unit, pieced together and the more he uncovered, the more it all pointed toward one Manan officer who had mysteriously disappeared after the mission, his record quietly erased. Daniel decided to bring Vala to the gathering, hoping it would be a calm, healing experience for them both. The crowd stepped back, startled. Daniel turned, confused at first, then followed Vala's gaze and locked eyes with the man. The man froze, his face pale. He stepped toward the man, his body language, unmistakable recognition, accusation. The crowd didn't understand, but Daniel did. He stepped forward, placing a hand on Vala's neck to steady him, and looked straight at the man. "I don't know what you're talking about." But his eyes gave him away. The event was peaceful at first, children feeding carrots to gentle mares, veterans quietly petting the horses, sharing stories. Daniel stood proudly beside Vala, explaining to visitors how he had saved countless lives in the war. Vala had carried the memory of that day all these years. He hadn't just saved Daniel's life, he'd remembered the face of the man who had caused so much death. Older now, wearing civilian clothes, blending in as just another visitor. But Daniel would never forget that face, and neither would Vala. The betrayal had been buried along with the fallen soldiers. Had someone in their own ranks betrayed them? Was that why so many lives were lost? Daniel raised his voice this time, firm, "You're not leaving. Not this time." He looked at Vala, who was staring at him silently, his breath heavy but calm now, as if he'd done his part to show Daniel the truth. This was the beginning of an unraveling. A secret, long buried, was about to be exposed, and the horse that everyone thought was just a forgotten piece of military history was about to change everything. His body stiffened, and he let out a deep, guttural snort, the same one he used to give in the war whenever they were approaching an ambush zone. One in particular caught his attention, a photo of their unit taken just days before the fateful mission that changed everything. Vala's breathing quickened, his eyes darting left and right. Then, slowly, he turned his head and looked back at Daniel with an intensity that made his heart pound. It was a supply run deep into hostile territory, a mission that ended in disaster. Half the squad never came back. Daniel and Valora had barely survived after being pinned down for hours. He remembered the explosion, the confusion, the smoke, but there were gaps in his memory. And now, seeing Vala's strange reaction, he wondered if the whores remembered something he didn't, and she was right. Vala wasn't just recognizing Daniel, he was real. At first, Vala kept his distance, cautious, but each day he came a little closer, staying a little longer. The sharp clang echoed across the barn, and in an instant, Vala jerked violently, pulling away and stomping his hooves, his breathing rapid and erratic. Daniel's instincts kicked in. He raised his hands and spoke firmly but calmly. "Vala, easy. It's okay. You're safe." It took minutes to calm him down, but when Vala finally stood, his eyes locked on Daniel's in a way that sent chills down his spine. There was something in that look, pain, fear, and something unspoken. Daniel spoke to him softly, reminding him of the mountains they crossed, the missions they survived, the soldiers they saved. He even hummed the old tune he used to whistle during long night watches. Slowly, Vala began to relax, but there were moments, brief, unsettling moments when something would trigger him. A loud noise, a shadow passing over the field, even the metallic clank of a gate closing. His ears would flick back sharply, his body would tense, and his eyes would glaze over like he was no longer in the quiet farm paddock, but back in the chaos of war. The next few days, Daniel visited the rescue farm every morning, bringing apples and carrots, brushing Vala's coat the way he used to during deployments. One afternoon, while Daniel was grooming him, a handler accidentally dropped a metal bucket. That night Daniel couldn't sleep. Determined to understand, Daniel returned to the farm the next morning and decided to take Vala out of the paddock for a walk on the open trail surrounding the property. Daniel froze. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. In that moment, Daniel saw it. Vala was remembering that mission. The memories hit Daniel in waves. The mission had been a setup. Vala shifted his weight and poured at the ground, snorting again, then lowered his head and touched his muzzle to Daniel's chest, pressing firmly as if urging him to remember more. There had been someone else there that day. A soldier from their own unit, someone they trusted, was speaking to the enemy, and Vala had seen it too. Daniel stepped back, shaking, his heart racing. That evening, Daniel dug deeper, but Vala had never forgotten. The following week, the rescue farm organized a public event where veterans and families could meet the retired more. Then, in the crowd, Daniel saw a face that made his blood run cold. It was him, the man from the mission. The moment Vala saw him, everything changed. The horse's ears pinned back, his muscles tensed. He let out a sharp, piercing neigh that silenced the entire event. Vala began to move. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't mindless rage. It was controlled, deliberate. "You were there," Daniel said quietly, his voice trembling with anger and realization. You betrayed us," the man stammered, backing away, and Vala wouldn't stop staring, his breathing sharp, his hooves scraping the ground in a slow, rhythmic pattern like he was ready to block the man's path. If he tried to run, the crowd murmured, confused, but Daniel felt it in his gut. This wasn't just an old memory. This was the truth coming to the surface. And now, standing in the middle of a quiet rescue farm, surrounded by civilians and veterans alike, the past was colliding with the present in a way no one expected. The man turned to leave, muttering an excuse, but Vala stepped forward, blocking him with a low, warning sound that silenced everyone. The crowd watched in stunned silence, and in that charged moment, as Vala stood like a living monument of truth and memory, everyone realized this was more than just a reunion between a soldier and his war. The crowd around the rescue farm fell into an uneasy silence, unsure what they were witnessing. Vala stood like a statue of living muscle and memory, his dark eyes locked on the man in the crowd. His ears were pinned back, nostrils flaring, each breath sharp and heavy like the echoes of the battlefield still lingered in him. The man, once just another visitor in civilian clothes, took a step back, his face pale, his body stiff with the kind of fear that comes not from a horse, but from recognition. He knew he had been seen, not just by Daniel but by the creature that had been there, the silent witness who never forgot. "I remember now. The ambush, the explosion. You weren't caught in it, were you? You disappeared before it happened." His eyes burned as the fragments of memory finally connected. He stepped forward, one deliberate pace at a time, stopping inches from the man. He understood this wasn't an attack, it was a reckoning. He lowered his massive head, nostrils flaring, and then made a guttural noise of warning, a call, a declaration that everyone felt in their chest. He backed away, shaking his head, but the truth was written all over his expression. I had no choice," he muttered, his voice breaking. "They had my family. They said they'd kill them if I didn't give them the coordinates." An older veteran stepped forward, his face lined with scars and time. "I know you," he said, his voice low but steady. "You're Carter, Lieutenant Carter." There was no hatred in the horse's eyes, only a deep, knowing sadness, a reminder that even after years, the truth finds its way out. The image of Vala standing like a sentinel of justice beside Daniel went viral, shared millions of times. People were in awe of the loyalty, the memory, the unshakable bond that had survived war, separation, and time. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. The sound was so powerful, so deliberate. It silenced Carter instantly. Finally, the ghosts of that day were laid to rest not by words, but by the unspoken testimony of a horse who refused to forget. The horse didn't move any closer, but his body language said everything. This was judgment. Some brought their own service animals. Some brought their children to teach them about loyalty, courage, and the cost of silence. Letters poured in from soldiers who had served with military animals, thanking Daniel for showing the world what these animals truly carried with them. He became a symbol, a living testament that loyalty doesn't fade, and truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always rise. His ashes were placed beside the memorial, and Daniel whispered as he scattered the last handful, "You never gave up on me, and I'll never give up on you." Donations flooded the rescue farm, enough to expand their facilities and care for dozens more retired warhorses. The farm was renamed Valor's Haven, in honor of the horse who remembered, who revealed the truth. Daniel swore he could hear the faint echo of who's steady, strong, unbroken, for those who carried the weight so others could live. "So you sacrificed our families instead." Instead, he stayed on at the farm, volunteering full-time. It showed a bronze sculpture of a soldier standing beside his horse, both looking out toward the horizon. On the plaque were simple words. He built a special paddock just for Valor, with open fields and soft grass, a place where he could finally rest without the weight of war pressing down on him. Every morning, Daniel would walk beside him, talking softly, brushing his mane, just like he had in the war. And sometimes, in the quiet of dawn, Valor would press his head gently against Daniel's shoulder, a silent thank you, a reminder that their bond was still unbreakable. "You betrayed your brothers." But the veterans in the crowd didn't wait. They closed in on Carter, their faces a mix of anger and sorrow. This wasn't just about one man's betrayal anymore. It was about the lives lost, the memories carried, the years stolen by a single selfish choice. You got them killed. You got Valor and me blown to pieces, and you walked away like it was nothing. You were supposed to lead that mission with Hayes' unit, but you vanished. They told us you went Mia, but you're here, alive. The man froze, unable to move, his breath shallow. "You were talking to them." I didn't want to believe it back then, but Valeri never forgot. Daniel didn't move his hand from Valera's neck, feeling the tension rippled through the stallion like a storm waiting to break. His heart pounded, his voice calm but deadly certain. "You were there that day," he said quietly, but the weight in his words cut through the murmur of the crowd. "You set us up," the man stammered. I don't know what you're talking about." He tried to muster a weak smile for the onlookers. "This is crazy. It's just a horse." They were looking between him and Valor, watching the horse's unwavering gaze, the way he stood rooted, blocking the man's path like a guardian of memory. Veterans in the crowd began to shift uncomfortably, some recognizing the signs of a horse on high alert, not aggression, but focus, the kind that only comes when an animal recognizes a scent, a face, a feeling burned into its mind. But the crowd was no longer looking at him with casual curiosity. Daniel stepped closer, his voice trembling with both rage and pain. He muttered, "This is ridiculous. I have nothing to do with this." But his voice shook, and that was all it took for the veterans in the crowd to step forward, forming a loose semicircle, not letting him slip away. The man's composure cracked. His eyes darted around the crowd as if looking for an escape route. Valor suddenly let out a low, deep sound that resonated through the farm like a drumbeat. The handlers looked at Daniel, waiting for a cue, but Daniel didn't hold Valor back. The silence was broken by a voice from the crowd. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Carter's face went pale as he realized the weight of the eyes on him. Daniel's stomach twisted. Carter's voice cracked. But before he could finish, Valor stomped his hoof with a sharp crack, cutting through the man's excuses. Marlena, the rescue farm manager, whispered to someone to call the authorities. When the authorities arrived, Carter didn't resist. He was taken away quietly, but not before looking back at Valor. His face haunted. The story spread like wildfire. News outlets picked it up almost instantly. Retired combat horse identifies traitor after years of silence. But for Daniel, It wasn't about the publicity. It was about closure. In the weeks that followed, Balor's story inspired thousands. Daniel didn't take Valor back to his old house. Months later, a memorial was unveiled on the farm for those who served and never forgot. Veterans came from all over the country to see it, and as time passed, Valor became more than just a horse. Years later, when Valor finally passed peacefully in his sleep, the entire town and hundreds of veterans gathered to honor him. In the final light of sunset that day, as the wind brushed softly through the fields, and he knew, somewhere beyond this world, they were riding together again.